The first episode of War Room Pandemic went air on the 25th of January 2020. According to my memory, upon its one-year anniversary, firstly, I present my congratulations to the War Room team and many appreciations for revealing the truth of the CCP virus. Secondly, then the question, what's next for the War Room?
It's a great question. First of all, I want to thank GTV, G News, Miles Guo. I mean, we would have never really understood the scale of this problem. We had the first anniversary on Monday, on the 25th. And the reason is that I was up in New York with Miles for Miles Guo's annual Lunar New Year celebration that we do every year to kind of, do a couple of days of broadcasting and talk about the CCP, talk about the people of China. And he told me then, we had heard through watching the websites that there was something, maybe a SARS breakout or some sort of SARS breakout in central China, but Miles really opened my eyes. He said, hey, there's not going to be a Lunar New Year, which shocked me because it's the first time, I think, in 10,000 years there hasn't been a Lunar New Year. It was absolutely stunning to me. Miles and the people at G News, GTV were telling me what was going on at Hubei. We were able to make contacts and relationships and really start a show that was at the forefront of the pandemic, of really covering the pandemic. And it's a testament, I think, to people like yourselves and Dr. Ming at CASO, this diaspora that is absolutely fearless in trying to get to the truth, to help the Chinese people in the mainland gain their freedom, also to help the diaspora of the Chinese people throughout the world to maintain their freedom, and also to help the West and the rest of the world understand the monster they're confronting in the Chinese Communist Party. Here's what we're going to do going forward. We're going to continue to report and make the centerpiece of the show about the Chinese Communist Party and its relationship to the world and how that affects the world. And obviously the pandemic is a central part of that. Today we're going to have Bill Gertz on. Bill Gertz, on our second or third show, in fact, this is the first year anniversary, talked about the Wuhan lab, talked about the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, control of the bioweapons program there. That led, Dr. Yan came forward and came out of Hong Kong shortly thereafter. Miles Guo had been saying this from the absolute beginning, and he was mocked and ridiculed and said, oh, he's a conspiracy theory guy, he's a fantasist. It turns out everything Miles Guo said was 100% correct. Everything Dr. Yan said was correct, and everything Bill Gertz said was correct. So we're going to continue to have the hammer dropped on this. And particularly right now, there has not been an accounting. There's not been any responsibility. Xi just gave his Davos speech the other day and did not mention at all their responsibility and accountability for the Chinese Communist Party virus that came out of the Wuhan lab. And so, I think you saw from Xi's comments the other day, they really, CCTV wants to start talking about it. Came out of Fort Detrick, the bio lab up in Western Maryland. But we're going to continue to hammer every day the Chinese Communist Party's responsibility for this global pandemic and this plague that they have led upon the world.
Based on the election results, do you think we have lost the information battleground to the CCP? In hindsight, what do you think we can do differently to change the results or to fight against the CCP in terms of information warfare? Thank you, Mr. Bannon. This is the first question.
The first thing we have to do is continue efforts and shows like yourselves and War Room, etc. This is getting the truth out. And this is one of the reasons the War Room's one of the biggest shows, if not the biggest show in the world, when you count everybody that sees it every day and how the information is pushed out. And that's because of, a big part of that's because of our connection with Lao Beijing and the connection with the diaspora of the Chinese people. Yes, certainly the tech oligarchs, and I think this is very important for the American people to understand. For months and months and months, we had specials on Saturday that would talk about the firewall that really separated the Chinese people in the mainland from the truth. A firewall that was essentially built by American technology and American companies in partnership with the Chinese Communist Party. You're seeing a firewall here today. Mike Lindell, the great CEO of MyPillow and one of the foremost voices in the Trump movement, and one of the foremost voices really of with his advertising dollars of supporting conservative media, was taken down permanently from Twitter today. He's already been banned by a number of different social media platforms, but he was banned permanently for Twitter for just speaking out of his concept of what the truth is, that it doesn't comport to what they want to do, and so they just take it down. So no, I think the most important thing we do is keep fighting, and by that I mean keep doing stories, keep doing analysis, keep pushing out the truth. Never relent from that. Never back off. And so I think that's absolutely the most important thing of information warfare. And look, people understand and see that something's wrong here, deeply wrong, and they see that something's deeply wrong in how the Chinese Communist Party has comported itself both to the Chinese people about this pandemic and also throughout the world. And so I think the truth ultimately wins out if we don't quit the fight.
Mr. Bannon, hours into his presidency, Biden fired Michael Pack, the head of the U.S. Agency for Global Media, USAGM, and nominated Ke-Lu Chao to be the interim head. And Chao carried out a purge for VOA, RFA, and RFE. What is your comment?
Well, I think it tells you everything about the Biden administration. This is why we're jamming up. We're very proud that we're confronting the Biden administration on all their radicalness. You know, we are the ones that were the forefront that stopped their immigration amnesty bill. Their single most important piece of legislation was going to be the amnesty bill that would basically give citizenship to 25 million illegal aliens. That's dead in the water right now. That's deader than the impeachment of Trump. This thing's they're already talking about how they break it up into small pieces and how they get the pieces put there. That's the single most important piece of legislation. That's what they put on the table day one. That's already been stopped. Yesterday in a federal court in Texas, they actually stopped Biden's radical executive order not to deport any criminal aliens. That was stopped by a Texas judge in a federal court. That was stopped. Biden's already come out with a this radical transgender initiative by an executive order saying that boys can basically compete in girls' sports. We are essentially in the process of stopping that and making that a national issue. What he's done on the CCP, you know, Tony Blinken, these people try to have a very moderate composure in responding to the CCP, but quite frankly, it's very radical. If you look at the confrontation President Trump had of actually confronting the CCP across a broad range, and if you look at what happened in the last week of the administration, the intelligence agency and the State Department came out and designated that Wuhan was actually under the control of the PLA, that they had lied about it, and that the experiments of the Batwoman were actually PLA experiments, and they were gain-of-function experiments that went awry, and that this leaked out from the Wuhan lab. If you see what Pompeo did about designating genocide against the Uyghurs, that the CCP is a genocide regime against the Uyghurs, if you see what he did about Huawei, there were actions taken, and also DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, which really the CIA reports to, said the Chinese Communist Party had an active role in the 2020 election. If you look at those actions the last week, that was putting the CCP on notice by the Trump administration. Biden's trying to unwind all that. He's already allowed the CCP opportunity to come into the power grid into the United States. He's been feckless about his response to Xi's really, to me, inappropriate speech at Davos, right? And so you've seen that the way we're going to handle the CCP is the same way we're handling immigration, the wall, girls' sports, this radical social agenda. We're going to confront the Biden administration every day. We're not going to back off, and that's going to force them to be tougher on the CCP. It should not be lost in your audience. During the confirmation hearing, Tony Blinken, these guys, to get confirmed, in order to get confirmed by the United States Senate, we're sitting there go, oh yeah, a lot of what happened under the Trump administration with the CCP was actually good, and we should realign ourselves to actually more of this confrontational alignment, although we're going to call it strategic patience. So as long as we continue to hammer the Biden administration and reveal that to the American people, your audience shouldn't miss the most fundamental point. The American people are tired of the Chinese Communist Party and their activities throughout the world. That has been the biggest thing that we have changed over the last 4 or 5 years. Part of that is because of things like GTV and G Media, G News. Part of it's because of the War Room, and others because we've got activists now that are actually engaged on a daily basis of bringing truth to the American people. And so I think I think it's been a huge sea change. The Biden administration will only do what they're forced to do because they're obviously compromised by the Chinese Communist Party, but they're being forced. I think they're being forced into a corner where they're going to have to respond, maybe not as tough as President Trump, but at least down that that line of action.